Okay, well, welcome everybody, and we always thank Andrew Richards for pulling this all together and for creating Poetic License and connecting our community. And because of the virtual format, people beyond Cape Cod, all over the place, can connect with us for Poetic License. You can view all the offerings that are available on the FCTV website, fctv.org. And before I go any further, I just want to send sort of a big virtual group hug to Donna Shear, the host of Poetic License. We miss you, and we can't wait to have you back. And I also wanted just to say that in addition to like workshops and educational offerings, that they also, FCTV has a lot of kinds of programming really quite timely. They have something that is called The Conversation about racism and social justice in our community, and Falmouth in Focus about our businesses and community events. And just also coming up on August 15th is the Falmouth Road Race, and they will be showing that live, as well as they replay the baseball game, the baseball team, the Falmouth Commodores. So if you're a baseball fan, you can see it on FCTV Channel 13. And our event is being recorded, and it will be on FCTV's YouTube channel. And just like a little shout out to baseball fans, if you are a poet who's a baseball fan, if you Google Gail Mazur's poem Baseball, it's a wonderful poem that celebrates baseball. And we're really lucky to have the Cape Cod Baseball League as really something that pulls the Cape together. The only other thing I just wanted to announce, and I'm going to link it to the second poem I'm going to read tonight, is FCTV is also doing a flea market fundraiser coming up this August 27th. It's called Clean Out Your Closet for a Cause. And you can call Lori Jo Joyce at FCTV. You can get that on their website, and you can clear out your clutter for FCTV. And we all know that the pandemic has been a good time for us to figure out what we want to keep and what we want to get rid of. And certainly there are many things that I still have that like CDs and DVDs, things that maybe we don't have that any longer. So the whole information's on their website. And you'll notice in the email that gets sent out, there is a way to donate to FCTV. When we started 2 years ago in August, there was a little donation box that does help FCTV. Or another way to give back is to become a member. The membership dues are very modest, and again, you can get that information on fctv.org. So I'm going to start. And actually, Andrew's going to show, I've written an ekphrastic poem for, I should introduce myself. I'm Alice, here it is. I'm Alice Kociemba. I'm the founding director of Calliope Poetry, and I am on the editorial team for a poetry anthology that celebrates Cape Cod and the islands called From the Farther Shore, Discovering Cape Cod and the Islands Through Poetry, that is going to be released in August by Bass River Press at the Cultural Center of Cape Cod. And I'll share more about the launch at the end. I just want to say a couple of things about the poem. It's called Homage to the Patricia Marie, and it's an ekphrastic poem, which is a poem inspired by, could be a painting, a piece of music. It could be inspired by another poem. And this one, Homage to the Patricia Marie, was inspired by a painting of the same name by Salvador Del Deo, who was one of the founders of the Fine Arts Works Center in Provincetown. And the painting and the poem pays tribute to the 7 fishermen who were lost in a squall on October 24th, 1976. It was the worst night for the Provincetown fishing community in over 60 years. And how I was able to write this poem, I did an awful lot of research through the Provincetown Banner, like reading the archives of newspaper, and also going to the Provincetown Historical Society archives, and through that getting to the inquest. And really, the language in the poem really comes from the fishermen themselves, the fishing community. And I chose a form that repeats the pantoum, repeating lines in order to sort of get the echo, how really haunting it is to lose people at sea. So, since our theme tonight is red, white, or blue, I certainly know that most poets have a blue poem, a poem that sort of is about loss and the things that make us sad. So this is a blue poem. Homage to the Patricia Marie, after the painting by Salvador Daldeo. All 7 crew missing, all presumed dead. The boy in blue stares wide-eyed away from the headline, his dead mother's name. Come home smelling like money, she'd have said. Dead, the Captain Billy, found blue and wide-eyed, clinging to a buoy 3 miles off Nauset. Come home smelling like money, she'd have said, dreaming of scallops piled high in the hole. Still clinging, that's Billy, son and grandson of captains, his boat named after his young first wife. This trip, the scallops filled the hole like a dream before a freaker swept them all into the deep. Along with the boat, a second death for his wife. We chose the life and the life chooses us. That freaker took their dragger into the deep, leaving only debris and the crew to wash up. They chose the life and the life took theirs. Dickie and Buddy never were found. Just debris and 5 bodies came home that winter. Billy, Bobby, Walter, Ernest, Mott. Dickie and Buddy forever lost in Polyp's Rip, where the sea gets real sloppy. Billy, Bobby, Walter, Mott. I think we found your husband. This key fits your lock. In Polyp's Rip, the sea gets real sloppy. On the wharf, a fisherman reads from the paper. They only knew it was Ernest when his key fit her lock. The men listen, hand to shoulder, shells and empty blue. The fisherman reads on, the paper now shaking. All 7 crew missing, all presumed dead. The men listen, hand to shoulder, as empty blue eyes look away from the headline, his dead mother's name. Thank you. Thank you. And I just wanted to say that form really helped me get a lot of information in a poem that would not have sounded poetic. And I do think that every once in a while, I'm not a formal poet, every once in a while, you just change gears and try something. I had never tried to do that kind of poem before, and I'm awfully glad the book gave me a chance to try it. So I'm going to introduce the first performer, and then I'm going to mute myself. So our first performer is a poet that I know, Lynne Viti. Lynne.
Hello to everybody. I'm Lynne Viti, and I'm going to read something that I thought was just it was a draft of a poem, but it turns out to be sort of a prose poem that's an introduction to the poem. So, and it is a blue poem. So sorry about all the blue tonight. August 17th, 1977. The day after Elvis died, I was in Cambridge, England, with my boyfriend, staying at an off-campus rooming house that was deserted. It was the height of summer and all the students had gone home. We had breakfast at a pub in town and picked up a copy of the International Herald Tribune. I had skipped Cambridge on my backpacking trip through Europe during college, and I had my heart set on renting a punt and exploring the Cam River. I talked Michael into doing all the work, and as I leaned back in the punt and watched him push the long pole into the muddy bottom of the river, I thought, this is the life. I'm just 30, I'm having a lovely summer with my younger boyfriend, and I'm about to read the newspaper. My eye fell upon the story about Elvis. Before the Beatles, when I was in elementary and junior high school, there was Elvis. I wasn't old enough to squeal and scream over him like the teenage girls in the audience of the Ed Sullivan Show, but I liked his music well enough, and I had seen his early movies at the Saturday matinee. By the time I started high school, Elvis's star had faded in my universe. We were screaming for the Beatles by 1964. Then we were listening to the Rolling Stones, the Grateful Dead, Jimi Hendrix, Big Brother and the Holding Company. In college, I became interested in jazz and heard Elvin Jones and Horace Silver in small, smoky Boston clubs. Elvis was by then a joke, a parody of himself, squeezed into his gold-trimmed white Las Vegas suits. That day in Cambridge in the punt, I read the obituary aloud to Michael. Neither of us felt particularly sad, but looking back on that day is another story. Here's the poem. Punting. Elvis had just died in Memphis. He was just 42. You and I had just moved in together to a third-floor walk-up in Brookline. We were just in Cambridge for a couple days, just long enough to rent a punt, travel up the River Cam for a few lazy hours. I lay back in the boat while you pushed the pole. I read aloud the King's obituary from the Herald Trib, just the two of us on a calm Tuesday, drifting, then and later, back home. For a short while, not quite in love, just close. A stepping stone was what we had, just enough for then, a short prelude to our separate lives. Now a fragment of that day comes back, your boyish laugh, your golden curls glinting in the English sun. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. It does bring me back. I hate to say, what I do remember about Elvis is the end of Elvis, but certainly I also remember my mother being horrified the way he swiveled his hips. So that was the beginning of what was to come in the 60s. So it's good to remember. So our next, featured performer is John Jackson. Please welcome John.
Now I am not muted. Okay, first off, find what I need to read. My name is John Jackson. My form of literary Tourette's is the limerick, and limericks of protest is what I do. I did write something for July 4th, and we will consider this one rather white. And it's rather deep, but short. I pledge my obedience to the ideal of the colonized states of America, and to the Republicans, party old and grand, white nation, claiming God, with liberty and justice for me. Now, back to my personal soap opera. Speaking about cleaning out the closets and flea markets and such, as some of you recall, we're in the process of moving my mother-in-law out of Dillingham Place into our small place in North Falmouth. And I'm in the process of cleaning out our Victorian house in Groton, Mass, near where I have to work because they pay me to be here. So, 4 days late, we thought it might fail. By internet, text, and email, it's finally signed. I've an apartment to find. Now we've got purchase and sale. Well, that was back in July 3rd. I have found an apartment since, yada, yada, yada. Okay, now back to the news. No one wants us to apologize, but race theory must not criticize. The lessons we teach shall be whitewashed with bleach, the history of little white lies. From July 4th, Massachusetts state troopers surprised. 11 men with guns before their eyes. 11 arrested. So far, no one's protested. A militia, somewhat organized. Edge of space past the ending of air is calling the tourist billionaire. I suppose it's their right to pay for a flight. Do you think we could just leave them there? Fellow citizens, hang on to your hats. Voting causes political spats. Trouble that they can see is that a democracy only encourages Democrats. Filling feeders is a bird lover's task. Please stop, Mass Audubon did ask. Prevent, if you please, unknown avian disease. Birds don't distance, nor do they mask. One thing that America has got, individual rights, and we got a lot. Gun rights, no disputing. Got a right to school shooting, but vaccines, my kids don't get shot. And this one, I had to invent a word, but please forgive me. As soon as his rocket arised, Jeff Bezos had the whole world surprised. Shiny, metallic, undeniably phallic, his rocket has been circumcised. And one last item from today, I took the day off to meet with Got Junk and to get the smoke detectors inspected. I learned an expensive lesson and came up with something about that. Cook bacon, the smoke signal squawks. Selling a house requires new out of the box. The fire inspectors failed my smoke detectors. Massachusetts require that one talks. So that's it for today.
I can say, John, I missed you so much. I can't believe that you can keep doing that. But
read this stuff. You can read this stuff online, dear.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. This is great. It's always good to have some humor as well as being a little blue and a little white humor to top it all off. That's great. So thank you. And if you could remute, that would be great too. The next performer is Candy Johansen. Please welcome Candy.
Hang on a second. Hello, everybody. My name is Candy Johansen. First and foremost, this is a blue poem, but I also added red, white, and blue into it. I was 14 years in the Navy, but I am probably one of the very liberal military people. But anyway, this photo was the inspiration for my poem. I took this in Sandwich at their, I think it's their 275th birthday or whatever parade. So this is my poem. He sat, the stick of a small American flag clenched in one hand, the other wrapped tightly around the handle of the walker placed right in front of his chair. His head was turned. His gaze was focused down the street. He waited, eagerness dancing in his eyes. The cacophony of people chattering, children laughing, horns honking, vendors shouting their wares up the middle of the street tickled his ear as faint sounds in the silence that was his norm. Suddenly, all went quiet. Children were shushed and quickly ushered back to the side of the road to sit on the curb or in the grass or on an adult's shoulders. Vendors quickly disappeared their carts behind the crowds, then stepped back to the side of the road to wait. He readied himself, gripping the walker tighter, tensing his muscles. The parade rounded a corner, and his back bowed and bent, his legs shaking, the small flag held aloft. He pulled himself up and shuffled forward until he stood in the encompassing safety of the walker, his right hand still grasping the cold metal bar that steadied him and kept him safe. Down the street, the flag fluttered and snapped in the breeze as it drew closer. Red and white stripes flowed back and forth. The small blue star-filled square sparkled and flashed in the sun. Hand trembling, he pushed down on the walker, his back straightening, his legs straightening, his mouth a tight, compressed line, his eyes bright and glowing, his face serious and filled with pride. The flag began its slow passage past him, and he released his grasp of the walker and raised his hand in a perfect salute to the flag and country he loved. For one brief moment, he was young and strong and handsome again, decked out in his uniform, medals gleaming on his chest. Once again, the flag fluttered and snapped, a return salute to a patriot, then continued on its way. He dropped his hand. His legs grew weak, and he shuffled back and away from the walker, a look of pride glowing in his eyes and on his face. A nurse took his hand and gently lowered him back onto his seat. His back once again bowed, his eyes once again pale and rheumy, the flag still clutched tightly in his hand. And as the old man sat back down, the nurse wondered if anyone else had seen the tall, young, handsome soldier that had just been there wearing his uniform and saluting his flag with such pride. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Candy. You could see it. It was a beautiful portrait, as though it were a photograph that kept going back and forth in time. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
And now our next performer is Jackson Gillman. Jackson.
Hi. Well, you've heard of a bird's eye view. This is a fisheye view, and it might incorporate a perspective of blue and of red. And I think it might be appreciated by the pescatarians amongst us. And it's called The Anchovy's Destiny. Once upon a time, some anchovies had been very forlorn and blue. Why were you so unhappy? Please tell us your story. Well, we swam in our school every day like good little fishies. We heard that someday we might be brought up into the light, and one day it happened. Our entire school was swept up into a cosmic lattice and lifted up. Yay! We're finally achieving our destiny! We were jostled about, and then I'm not quite sure what happened next, but we ended up lying side by side, tightly packed in a pool of olivaceous oil and hermetically sealed. This can't be the end, though. We would have nodded, but we were headless, but we all agreed and knew we had another fate. Everything in the world has to decompose or be eaten in order to remain in the endless cycle of life. But there we lay in our oily, pitch-black home for a long, long time. Many finless creatures passed us by, saying that we sounded funny, we smelled weird, and we tasted too salty. Oh, woe were we. But eventually we were picked up. The ceiling was lifted back, and we saw the light. This is it. We're finally going to be savored for the delectable fish that we are. But before that happened, we were laid out artfully in a pool of red sauce on a luscious, yeasty bed. Then it got so hot that our salty oiliness suffused with the sauce, mushrooms, onions, and melted cheese. When we were finally eaten, intermingled with all those other sweet tastes, we heard somebody say, "This is the best pizza I've ever had in my entire life." What a way to go. And I have one other to try and cover the white aspect here. This one's in a more serious traditional poetic vein, and I wrote this when I was in college many decades ago. It's called The Dance. The snow has stopped falling, but it hasn't stopped dancing. The last flakes to leave their cloudy sky home lay restless on their compacted, earthbound predecessors. A whirlwind gust lifts them again, whirling and winding themselves into little white tornadoes, picking up any willing crystalline strays along the way to who knows where. Some finally hunker down and surrender themselves to the inevitable change of structure and form, from individual crystals to coalesced granular corn. Then to a liquid, which might go in any of many directions, through a root hair and assimilated into a complex structure, or transpired back into the ether, or to attract its like and meander cumulatively in trickle, rivulet, stream, pond, lake, river, to salinated sea, where, when and wherever, it will be distilled into its purest form, a vapor of its former self, to magically levitate, co-mingle and waft into heavier and heavier swarm, till the Great Spirit, in order of all things, sees fit to unleash it in a fresh new dance and adventure. The snow has stopped falling, but it hasn't stopped dancing, nor will it ever. And who's to say that our liquid spirit doesn't similarly recycle?
That was wonderful. Actually, it's so visual and so emotive. I might actually have an anchovy pizza after this. I must admit the idea of them always turned me off, but I think I should be keeping an open mind. And maybe I'll turn on some dance music. So
yeah, I thought I disliked anchovies until I had them in a pizza.
No, that's great. Thank you so much, Jackson. So our next reader is Linda Marie Steele. And please give her an extra welcome because it's her first time here.
Thank you. Thank you. So grateful to be here. I've been enjoying listening. I'm going to read a piece called Lifting the Veil. And I would have to say, I already know it's under 4 minutes because I read it at Martha's Vineyard Institute of Creative Writers Conference recently. I would say it's a blue piece with some hints of white. And the red comes in when you hear the topic is because I feel passionate towards it. So there's a bit of red, white, and blue, but not traditionally. And it's not, it's actually, it has poetic elements, but it's more flash fiction. So I'm actually gonna read it from I'm gonna pull up my piece here. So, okay. It's called Lifting the Veil. Nana, what should I do? I ask into the open air as I sit in my hot car before driving away from the sober house my son is at, his third attempt at 30 days. A month before, he woke in a hospital bed after crashing his father's truck into a tree. I stop to listen to the silence. I hear, when we lift the veil, things become clear. If there's a soul debt that needs to be paid, I'm not sure yet if it's my son's or mine. I'm reaching out to my Nana beyond the veil because growing up, she was the only one who listened, the only one who heard what I had to say. I started talking to her more often about a week ago. I call out to her when I'm still in bed early in the morning or sitting in my car. She passed on Halloween night, 1995. Nathan, 10 months old the night she died. She is over there, but not gone. I put my hand on my son's arm, hoping my tenderness might rub off on him. I wonder, aren't all acts of pain and harm an act of self-hatred? Don't we really just need to love ourselves some more? But not some stupid cliche. If we lift the veil on our own self-rejection, won't we find our way home? He said he thinks he spent too many years wanting to be part of a popular crowd. I told him, look for the helpers and the kind ones. Those are your people. He said he has a new sponsor. In AA, I asked. He said, no, Mom, NA. And he pronounced each syllable so clearly, Narcotics Anonymous. That immediately got me thinking about how years ago, someone actually had to tell me my husband was an alcoholic. I was shocked. An alcoholic, they said. It was no secret to those around me. I was in denial. People whispered, she's in denial. But I think denial is really rooted in love and the desire to protect and fear of losing what we love the most, and not in rejection. When we lift the veil, things become clearer. I hear my Nana whisper from beyond. I lean over to kiss his shoulder, surprised how soft and fresh his bright white shirt is. I've never seen this before, I tell him. His sandy blonde hair, bright blue eyes, and wide smile feel out of place in this cold foreign space. I imagine him on a sandy beach with friends. This too is my denial. I tell myself this is not actually the life he is living. I don't want to look beyond this veil. I imagine him as that little boy that ran as fast as he could on the first day of kindergarten so he could meet his new teacher, or holding his hand crossing the street, and all the times I carefully put him in his car seat, being the star of his basketball team in high school. But somewhere along the way, someone offered him something or he went looking for it, and the rest remains beyond the veil, so to speak. He still said he felt sorry the way he's messed things up. We need you to be here, I tell him. I didn't want to leave him there, but I could not stay. I see my reflection in the car window and feel a sadness so deep that I called again to that world beyond and hear once again, when we lift the veil, things become clearer. I know my Nana is there with me then, reaching to me from beyond the veil. And I ask her if she could please stay by his side because it was time for me to go and I could not stay. As I drove away, I knew she was going to stay. I think you're muted.
I am muted. That was beautiful, Linda.
Thank you.
One of the reasons why at the beginning we really didn't want this just to be for, poetry. We wanted music, but we also wanted, flash fiction is such a gripping way to tell a story, and I think that you just rendered that so beautifully. So thank you.
Thank you.
And I think that our next, I always call people a performer because I don't know whether what they're going to do, but I think I'll wait to see if our next performer comes, and we're gonna then we can fit her in. But right now we're gonna go to Theresa Gleason, who I know. So welcome, Theresa.
Hi, everybody. Happy to be here. My lamp died, so I'm hoping I'm going to be able to read in the dark here. That was beautiful, Linda. And it's interesting that we end up coming one after the other because I'm going to read a poem about my son who was in the Army for 10 years, and he was stationed in Iraq, Afghanistan, Lebanon, and Syria over the course of 10 years of service. And thankfully he came home, safe and sound, at least in body, hopefully in mind and spirit, but not so lucky for everyone that was with him. So the first poem I'm going to read is about my son, and the second one was a poem I wrote after one of his friends was killed in Iraq. And by the way, it's in my recently published new book that it's taken me a long time to finally finish. But if anybody's out there like, oh, I really want to do it, it's been a wonderful thing to have it in print. And I did it through Kindle Direct Publishing, and had paid a woman to help me with the design and everything. And I've been so thrilled with the response I've gotten from the people that I've shared it with, and I was so nervous about that because they're mostly very personal poems. But be brave if you're thinking of doing it. It really is a good thing. Okay. Graduation from basic. From the silvery bank of bleachers, I search the neat formation of soldiers, find my son's tired face, dressed to kill, in combat boots and fatigues. He stands down when ordered. All his life he's been waiting for someone to tell him what to do. The army will send him to Death Valley to practice desert and heat. They supply camelbacks, flak jackets, real Iraqis to play the insurgents. I stand before him, his eyes vacant as the snowy egret slain for its smart plume. Over his shoulder, a single wisp of quiet smoke takes to the sky, thing unyoked for meaning. I think of the shaved ice I once let him eat, turning his tongue blue. And the second poem, I'll also say too that I kind of at the last minute submitted it to this Voices of Peace, which is a Cape Cod Veterans for Peace. They do a contest every year, and it's mostly school kids, but I sent in, and it was published in their book this year. So this one's called Another Gun. So help him God, hand over heart he swore, to make his dad proud and do as he's told. Another gun cast into the theater of war. Fighting militia, ragged and poor, re-gifted mortars and rockets explode. So help him God, hand over heart he swore, at the camel spiders hard to ignore, as the begging children on the side of the road, innocents trapped in the theater of war. Fear gripped his jaw as he kicked down a door. The pain in his chest made his sweat run cold. So help him God, hand over heart he swore, don't let me die on the Gulf's desert shore. By dawn's early light, all our illusions erode as he exits stage left from the theater of war. Grieve for a son shipped home from his tour, a gold star mother given a flag to hold. So help us, God, hand over hearts, we swear, enough, no more, curtain call for the theater of war.
Theresa, that was quite moving. And can you tell us the name of your collection?
Oh, sure. It's called Ruby Throat. And that's the proof. And it's available on Amazon. And yeah, that's one of the title poem is Ruby Throat.
No. And yeah, I knew the Max Money, who has since passed, but he was the founder of the Veterans for Peace movement, and it's continued. He was a Vietnam veteran, and there was a very active group of poets who came back from the Vietnam War. And I do think that, the 4th of July does cause us, or, red, white, and blue, to really reflect on the cost of war, and the cost of war on the families and on the children and the grandchildren. So thank you for reading
And
that.
I don't know if you could hear it, but some of the Star Spangled Banner is under the poem.
Mhm.
And it was also an attempt at a sestina, which was not 100% successful. At a certain point, I had to kind of let that go. But I think it did help with kind of getting it to where it is. So.
Yes. Yeah. And, sometimes we think we have to be a slave to the form.
Yeah.
And really what it does, the words, the N words and the rhyme ties it together so you can really follow it along if you're listening rather than reading it in a book. So it's, again, very successful. So thank you.
Thank you.
And, it's always hard to come after, we don't know what we're going to read and who's going to come next. But, every poet I know and every performer really takes a theme like red, white, or blue, and they interpret it in the way that they're meant to interpret it. And our next performer is Susan Beth Carlson. So please welcome Sue.
Hi. It's interesting that you just said what you said, because I have a long introduction as usual, longer than my poem. Red, white, or blue. As usual, the creative in me wants to move beyond the limits of convention. It's that kind of thinking that helps keep this redhead from feeling blue. So I put up the white flag on choosing just one of these American colors and opt instead, as is my license in this poetic company, to choose the color of global life, green. Donna Shear, who also facilitates these poetry gatherings and creative gatherings, noticed how much of my writing centers on nature and the earth. More than ever, that's true, because I believe it's our most pressing challenge. And without it, none of the other challenges matter, because we won't be here to address them. Since my talents don't lie in directly finding solutions for the earth, I hope to inspire others to each do what we can in how we live our lives individually and collaboratively. And so Eden is another look at this earth and those of us within it. And in this group, I really do feel like I'm preaching to the choir, but I'll read it anyway. It's called Sustaining Eden. Yesterday I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. Today I am wise, so I am changing myself. I've always cherished this wisdom of Rumi's, but I thought, why change yourself? Evolve instead. What's the difference? Does a song change to a different song because someone starts to sing along in harmony? Does it change to a different song if transposed to another key? Or is it just evolving? Then think instead of the bonsai. It is carefully changed, purposefully amended and cut back, minimizing its growth. I prefer to live life as an evolving permaculture garden, brimming with communal diversity and freedom. In that process, I do not change. I am not a different person, just the same person naturally evolving while I grow in concert with this wondrous garden of other growing beings. Eden is not a place. It is a way of being. Let's sustain it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. And, you did what I hoped you would do, which is to take whatever a theme takes you. And it doesn't take you in a linear fashion, but it's, again, just like what Theresa did. It's something that we really have to pay attention to now. Or else it will be, certainly east of Eden will be sort of beyond where we need to be. And our next poet is also new to Poetic License. We give her an extra hand. Please welcome Nancy Cherico.
Thank you. My name is Nancy Cherico, and I'm really happy to be here. I've really enjoyed everyone's performance this evening. My first poem is vaguely references being white in America. And the title is When I Found Out I Was a Mayflower Descendant. I walked right into the uppity next door New England town with my chest out, my head swelled up. My ancestors founded this place. Who are you? What a surprise to learn I come from Pilgrim stock when my humble hillbilly roots run hip deep. My mountain people, nothing to brag about. The weight of cruel oppression my Mayflower forebears heaped on indigenous folk, whose lands and lives they stole, soon burdened my newfound pride, complicated my new identity. Then, when a DNA test showed no match, several ancestors fell out of the family tree. I was relieved to just be me again, though my brief tenure as Mayflower descendant left me to wonder who any of us is after all. And my next poem is simply about a white flower. Surprise at the garden center. As I walk toward the cashier with my hanging basket of petunias, out of the corner of my eye, I spot a potted gardenia in bloom. Tropical misplacement in this zone. 3 creamy blossoms untouched, virgin perfection. Scent so dense and spicy it lingers on my tongue. I bury my nose in their white velvet, grow tipsy with memories. The tender Georgia prom night, my off-the-shoulder blue satin dress, gardenia corsage on my wrist instead of my breast, lest it be bruised in the slow dances. High school gym, a South Sea aisle, fake palms, crepe paper streamers, moonlight and hormones. After I married and moved up north, my father came to visit. He placed his hard-sided suitcase on my kitchen table, opened it like a book. One side contained his clothes. The other was lined with plastic and moss and 32 gardenia blooms, one for each year since my birth. This all started when my young mother came to after giving birth to me, dazed, drugged, thirsty. She drained every drop of water from the vase beside her bed in which my father had placed a single gardenia.
Both of those were wonderful, Nancy. You know, you can really like not only smell it, but it's such a beautiful portrait. And I must admit, I've always wanted to do those DNA tests, and I've always had a slight suspicion, but now I know that there's a reason for it, because sometimes you can think you're somebody. I would prefer to be royalty myself. So if I'm not a descendant of, Queen Bess, then I really don't really want to know who I'm really descended from. So thank you for both of those poems. And our next reader is Merryn Rutledge. Please welcome Merryn.
Thank you, Alice, and everyone. Good to be back with you. My name is Merryn Rutledge, and in a poem series written over the past year, I've been reflecting on growing up as a white Southern girl. This poem is one of those lessons or markers in the forming of these triple identities: white, Southern girl. Reward. Mrs. Smith snapped at mistakes, scolded joy, strangled praise, as she stood over us, smelling sour, with a fist on each hip and sweat stains under each armpit. When anybody asked why about science, a story, or a silly rule, she stretched her lips to a thin, straight line that made the crooked hair in the mole on her chin point like a finger. I mostly kept my head down, learning what we were supposed to, the history of Virginia, told as the story of the real America. I liked wandering into Franklin's experiments and the Adams farm, but our textbook lured me back to local lore. Give me liberty or give me death. Jefferson proclaiming, we hold these rights. Pictures of neat plantations worked by brown blurs. Mount Vernon, a little way down the Potomac from my modest house. When somebody asked why about the slaves, Mrs. Smith's mouth drew a line. At the school assembly at the close of the year, while Mrs. Smith spread manure-y breath on our heads, I heard the principal call my name. This year's Daughters of American Revolution History Award, a red, white, and blue pin in a velvet box. My stomach felt funny, fluttery proud, and tumbly confused. Who were these daughters giving me a prize? Not my ancestors, who were not rich wives of Declaration signers, but in the cracked picture my uncle once showed, hard scrabble farmers posing with their slaves. Southern relatives we went to see each summer who still flung the N-word like a whip. Faceless slaves in our history book, Indian maids. I liked marching to the stage to shake the principal's hand, the pretty pen, and how Mrs. Smith's tyranny could not override my perfect essays and perfect tests. But at the end of the day, I put my reward in a drawer beside all the question marks, thin, barbed hooks.
Wow, wonderful sound in that one, Merryn. Just, quite moving, the red, white, and blue, but also, just who we really are. So thank you so much for that. It's my first time meeting you, but hopefully we can meet again. And I think, I don't want to overlook anybody, but to my knowledge, Tricia Austin and Christina Laurie aren't here. So if they are, we'll have to unmute, but I don't think so. So we're going to ask everybody right now to unmute themselves because our next performer is Tom Padovano, who is a comedian. And in order for him to get a sense of our reaction, we're going to be unmuted. So everybody unmute. So Tom, you're on.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, the other day, I was so mad, I saw red. Well, maybe it was because my girlfriend wrapped my head around the Chinese flag. When I was a kid, I told my mother I hated white bread. So she would toast it and go, now it's brown. The other day, I said to my girlfriend, I feel blue. She said, Tom, don't worry. You don't look blue. You look very pale. My friend's pigment is so white, they use it to make surrender flags. Terrible. Now, my uncle says he's a blue blood, and I think he is because he's 50% Smurf. Does anybody remember those red wagons, little red wagons? Yeah, my mother used to have me sit in them and she'd pull on the handle and take me all around the neighborhood, and I'd wave to the neighbors and they wave back. But she stopped doing that last year. I don't understand why she did that. Now, I have a tough uncle. As a kid, he would read me nursery rhymes, but his version, yo, Tom, Mary had a little lamb. Its fleece was white as snow, but everywhere that Mary went, the cops knew about it. See, Tom, they were following Mary because that lamb she stole from Little Bo Peep. Terrible, I'm looking for a new health plan, and there's so many to choose from. You got Blue Cross, you got Blue Shield, you got Blue Nun. You even got Blue Velvet. Whoa. But I chose IHOP. Yes, International House of Physicians. Well, I love their slogan. If we can't cure you, we will pay for the funeral. So they assigned me a doctor, Dr. Julio Alejandro Bernstein. This man is amazing. He examined me for less than 5 minutes and told me to come back the next morning for an autopsy. And then I said, doctor, it hurts me when I touch here, hurts me when I touch here, hurts me when I touch here. He goes, idiot, you got a broken finger. Well, listen, I hope my routine didn't make you blue. Thank you so much for letting me perform.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna ask you all to mute one more time. I'm gonna end with hopefully a humorous poem. Although I always said it's hard to perform after a kid, after a musician, and after a comic. So I decided I would try to read a humorous poem, and it picks up on something that John Jackson was talking about, and it relates to FCTVs, clean out your closet for a cause. And it's from my book, Born Bridge. And I realized as I was reading this before we started that I'm from Boston, so I don't know if anybody can see this or knows what this is. Some people call it rubber bands, but when I grew up in Boston, we called them elastics. So when you get to a phrase that has an elastic in it, that's what I'm talking about. So, we're at an age that our children are going to clean out our houses. So I think it behooves us to try very quickly to do it before August 27th so that it can benefit FCTV. So this is, also dedicated to my mother, who had a great sense of humor. So it's my mother's junk drawer. Admit it, you have at least one, the bottom drawer in the pantry, or if you're excessive, all the ones in the old blue bureau, under the poster, I like Ike, cute in his khaki uniform. There's a treasure trove of twisties, and in another crumbling plastic bag, elastics, also crumbling. Dried out black magic markers, some with their caps on. Nubs of number 2 pencils, one splintered thin, the perfect wedge for the wobbly kitchen table. More nuts than bolts. Red thumbtacks, a ruler, the gray cracked sink stopper, a carpenter's level, the frayed cord to the waffle iron, extra fuses, some burnt out, in with the good ones. So really, it's time when they clean out the stuff that I've said, they'll say, why did she save all of that? So why don't we, I just want to have a couple announcements and then we'll all unmute and just talk. But again, thank Andrew Richards and FCTV for putting this together. And he did show you the cover of the book From the Farther Shore, Discovering Cape Cod and the Islands Through Poetry. It's soon to be released. The launch for the anthology is going to be held on Sunday, August 29th from 2 to 4 at the Cultural Center of Cape Cod in South Yarmouth. And the book will be available both on the Cultural Center's website, all the independent bookstores on the Cape, and we're setting up readings. The next one will be on Martha's Vineyard. So if you get a chance to look at it, what you'll see is that all the poets and celebrates the region, the history, the heritage, and the spirit of Cape Cod and the islands. And we have poets from as far away as Hawaii and, all over the United States, and also a lot of poets from Cape Cod. You'll also recognize that maybe Robin Smith Johnson, who is very active in this poetry scene, as co-founder of the Steeple Street Poets, and my husband, Rich Humans, and I, we pulled this together. We had over 1,000 submissions, and we winnowed it down to 118 poems. It starts with Stanley Kunitz's Route 6, and it ends with Mary Oliver's Coming Home. And in the middle, there's a lot of surprises, and we'd hope you would appreciate it. So the only other note is the next Poetic license will be Thursday, August 26th. Please spread the word for us, and please come back. And the theme is hometown. And so you can, again, take that in all directions that you want. People have many hometowns. When I grew where some people would ask me, where are you from? And I'm from Boston. Usually they would say, what was your parish? Like, what parish did you grow up in? Which told a lot about your ethnicity and your social class. So, you could say you were from all kinds of places, but please come back and take that theme wherever you want to take it, just as we did tonight. So everybody unmute, and I really appreciate meeting you and seeing you all again. And we'll look forward to having Donna Shear back in her role as host. And thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.